Once upon a time in a quiet little village, there was a young girl named Mireille. She was beautiful, respectful, and an only child. Her mother had raised her alone and had given her everything. From a very young age, Mireille attracted attention. Even when she was still in middle school, men would already come asking for her hand in marriage. But her mother always gave the same answer. My daughter must first finish her studies and go to university. Marriage will come after. But the suitors didn't give up. Every morning when Mireille left for school, several men would stop her on the way to talk about marriage. Mireille always remained calm. She replied confidently but without aggression. "I'm sorry, I don't want to get married now. I want to go to university, get a good job, and take care of my mother. When the time comes, I'll be ready." Even those who claimed they just wanted to be friends, she replied with the same kindness. She never disrespected anyone, no matter how persistent they were. Mireille stayed humble, obedient, and focused on her goals. Her mother was proud of her, not just for her beauty, but more for her maturity, her discipline, and the dignified way she carried herself. Often in the evenings after school, Mireille would sit with her mother under the old mango tree in the courtyard. While sorting beans, the wind gently rustled the leaves. These moments were simple but precious. They laughed and dreamed together in peace. One day, with eyes full of emotion, Mireille looked at her mother and said, "Mom, I can't wait to earn money so I can take care of you. You fought so hard for me, especially after Dad died. Even when things were tough, you never gave up on me. You made it possible for me to continue my studies. You're my hero, and I promise I'll make you proud." Her mother smiled at her tenderly. Her face bore the marks of years of sacrifice. She gently placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder and said, "My daughter, this is exactly what I asked God for you. I want you to succeed so I can enjoy the fruits of all that I've sown. You are all I have. Seeing you rise will be my greatest joy." Those words remained etched in Mireille's heart. They gave her strength on difficult days, when the path to school felt long, when the books felt too heavy, or when the temptations of the world tried to distract her. But she stayed focused. She studied late at night by the light of an oil lamp, and every morning before school, she helped her mother with household chores. The suitors kept coming, more numerous and more insistent than before. But Mireille never gave in. Her dream went far beyond a rushed marriage. She thought about her future, her mother's future, and everything she had promised herself. She wanted to accomplish something great, something worthy. Little by little, some girls in the village began to grow jealous. Every day, another new suitor would knock on Mireille's door. Men came to talk marriage. Others just wanted to be her friend. But she turned them all down, always gently, always respectfully. Even her best friend, Clarice, began to feel bitter. She would sometimes whisper to others, "Aren't we girls too in this village? Why is it always her they come to see? Every man wants to marry her. Even the ones just looking for a girlfriend go straight to her, and she turns them all down." In public, Clarice still said, "Mireille is my best friend." But deep down she was boiling with rage. "I hate her. She acts like she's the most beautiful girl in the world. Honestly, I wonder, does she use something to attract all these men? I'm starting to have doubts." Even the young men in the village no longer looked at her the same. After being rejected so many times, their pride took a hit. Annoyance slowly replaced admiration. One afternoon, as Clarice was walking to the market, she passed by a group of boys sitting under a tree. They were speaking in hushed but bitter voices. "This girl Mireille. She humiliated all of us. She rejected every one of us like we were worthless. Who does she think she is? It's like no man in this village is good enough for her." Another added, "If only we could teach her a lesson." Upon hearing those words, Clarice wasn't shocked. On the contrary, she saw an opportunity. She stepped forward with a sly smile and said, "I know how we can teach her a real lesson. Honestly, she disrespected you all. She walks through this village like she's the Queen of England." One of the boys squinted and asked, "And how do we do that?" Clarice glanced around and whispered, "You know, here, stealing is a serious sin. Especially if it's something that belongs to the village chief." "Yes," they all replied in unison. She continued, "We're going to make it look like Mireille stole something from the chief." Another boy frowned. "That won't work. Mireille is too smart. She knows stealing is strictly forbidden here. She would never do such a thing. But Clarice wasn't discouraged. She smiled again, her eyes gleaming with malice. Let me handle it. She still trusts me. She still thinks I'm her best friend. I know how to set the trap. The boys looked at each other, then turned their eyes to Clarice. Slowly they nodded. A dark plan was born in their hearts. That night Clarice couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, her mind filled with envy and wicked excitement. At dawn, she got up early, stood in front of her mirror, and whispered to her reflection. Today Mireille will do the unthinkable. Today she will be covered in shame. The whole village will see her as a thief. No man will want her anymore. Maybe then, they'll finally notice me. She smiled at herself, her gaze cold and calculating. She picked up a basket and headed toward Mireille's house. As usual, Mireille was already awake, sweeping the courtyard with grace, focused on her task. Good morning, my beautiful friend, Clarice said in a sweet voice, hiding her true intentions. Good morning, Clarice, replied Mireille. Wow, you're here early today.
Everything is fine, my dear, Clarice replied. Actually, I came to ask you for a small favor. What kind of favor? Meyer asked, intrigued. My friend, the one who works as a maid at the king's palace, was supposed to go harvest corn at the royal farm, Clarice explained. But she's overwhelmed with other tasks. So she begged me to help her. And I can't do it alone. That's why I came to ask you to come with me. Meyer looked at her a bit worried. Wait, do you realize what you're saying? You forgot that no one steps into the king's farm without his direct authorization? That's a serious offense here. I haven't forgotten anything, Clarice replied confidently. In fact, I just came back from the palace. My friend told the king, and he gave his permission for me to help. So you see, I have the king's blessing. Meyer sighed in relief. Well, if the king knows, then there's no problem. I'll help you. But today's Saturday, I still have chores to finish at home. You'll have to wait a bit. No, my dear, Clarice insisted. Let's go now. You can finish your cleaning later. It won't take long. Moved by her friend's insistence, Meyer agreed and followed her. When they arrived at the royal farm, they began harvesting the corn. Everything seemed normal until Clarice suddenly started screaming. Thief! Thief! She's stealing corn from the king's farm. Meyer didn't even have time to react. Suddenly, a group of young men sprang from the bushes. It was a trap, exactly as Clarice had planned. They rushed at her and dragged her violently. Thief! You've committed an abomination. We must take you before the king. In shock, Meyer tried to explain. Please, I'm innocent. I just wanted to help my friend. But no one listened. The boys dragged her to the palace, ignoring her pleas. In front of the king, Meyer, covered in scratches and trembling, cried uncontrollably. Your Majesty, I beg you, I'm innocent. Clarice asked me to help her harvest corn. She told me you had given your permission. I didn't steal anything. But Clarice stepped forward coldly, without the slightest emotion. Your Majesty, she's lying. With all these witnesses here, we caught her stealing. The king turned to the young men. They all nodded solemnly. It's true, they answered in unison. We saw her steal with our own eyes. The king's face hardened. Young girl, as beautiful as you may be, you are a thief. Do you know the punishment for those who steal from the king's property? It's death. You will be stoned in the village square. I have spoken, and so it shall be. Meyer collapsed in tears. No, please, I'm innocent. My mother has only me. Don't let them kill me. But her cries were met with silence. Among the palace maids, a young woman named Grace watched the scene, tears welling in her eyes. Why such a harsh judgment without even seeking more proof? She whispered. I see the innocence in her eyes. Meanwhile, the villagers dragged Meyer to the public square. The news had spread like wildfire. A crowd had gathered, stones already in hand. When Meyer's mother heard what was happening, she ran with all her might despite her age. When she arrived at the square, she saw her daughter beaten and bloodied, surrounded by angry faces. She collapsed to her knees and cried, I beg you, my daughter is innocent. I swear it on my own life. But the palace guards yelled at her without mercy. Old woman, your daughter is a thief. She stole from the king's farm, and the king has spoken. Who are you to question his word? As soon as the first stone was thrown, Meyer screamed. Her mother screamed until she lost her voice. When her daughter's lifeless body hit the ground, she fainted in grief. Without pity or the slightest remorse, the villagers carried Meyer's body to the cursed forest, where the condemned are left. Only one man didn't follow the crowd. He was a stranger from a neighboring village. He picked up Meyer's unconscious mother and brought her home. He stayed by her side until she regained consciousness. When she opened her eyes, weak and confused, she whispered, "Where am I? Where is my daughter?" The young man looked at her with sadness. "Please calm down. Your daughter's body was taken to the cursed forest. My name is Noel. I'm not from here. I was just visiting a friend. And what I saw today, it was murder. They killed an innocent girl without any proof. It's injustice." But Meyer's mother heard nothing. Her world had collapsed. She had fallen into such deep sorrow that no one could reach her. She wept endlessly, her heart shattered. "Let me take you to my village," Noel gently offered. "You can't stay here alone. I live with my younger brother. You can live with us." But she didn't respond. Her soul was buried with her daughter. After a long silent moment, the young man stood and said quietly, "I will leave, but I'll return. I'll come see you from time to time." He turned and walked away, heart heavy, devastated by the cruel fate of a young girl whose only crime was her purity, and by the pain of a mother broken by betrayal. Meanwhile, Clarice could no longer sleep. The nights became torment. Nightmares haunted her. Always the same, Mireille's bloodied face. She cried alone in the dark. "I didn't want her to die," she whispered. "I just wanted her to be humiliated, for people to think she was a thief. Not this, not death." Tears streamed down her face. "Oh, my friend, I'm sorry."
What have I done? He asked himself every day. But it was too late. The damage was done. The next day, Noel returned to Mireille's mother's house to check on her. What he found broke his heart. The old woman was very ill. Lying on the ground, pale and weak, she couldn't even sit up. Without wasting a second, Noel ran to the pharmacist's shop. He bought medicine and clean water. Then he came back and gently cared for her, trying to ease her pain. 3 days had passed since the villagers threw Mireille's body into the cursed forest. But on the 4th morning, something strange happened. Still weak, Mireille's mother got up early to get some fresh air. She stepped outside, and what she saw froze her in place. There, right in front of her door, lay her daughter's body. "My daughter's body! My daughter's body!" she screamed. Mireille's mother let out a cry of horror and collapsed in tears. Her sobs shattered the silence of the morning. Neighbors rushed over. When they arrived, they stopped, stunned by the scene in front of them. Mireille's body was there. Not decomposed, not dirty. She looked like she was simply asleep, peaceful, as if nothing had happened. The villagers stared at one another, terrified and shaken. "The forest rejected her," murmured an elder. "Yes," another added gravely. "She was innocent. The cursed forest never keeps the bodies of the innocent. It returns them when we've killed someone pure." The news quickly spread throughout the village. A silent crowd gathered, full of shame. Women wept openly. Men hung their heads. The truth they had refused to see was now exploding in their faces. Mireille's mother collapsed again, sobbing so hard that her body couldn't take it anymore. When the village chief learned what had happened, he remained silent for a long time. Then, slowly, he stood up, removed his crown, and declared before his guards and the elders, "We have spilled the blood of an innocent, and I will carry that burden for the rest of my life." That same day, the villagers buried Mireille in her father's land, where her spirit could finally rest in peace. The entire village was in mourning. Wails of lament rose into the sky. Even the trees seemed to bow under the weight of the sadness. The next day, Noel returned once more to visit Mireille's mother. But this time the atmosphere had changed. He arrived just after the burial and listened to the whole story. When he understood that Mireille had been innocent from the beginning, he sat next to her mother and cried, "I knew it. he whispered. She was pure, too pure for this cruel world. Mother, I make you a promise. I will never abandon you. As long as I live, you will never be alone. Mireille's mother looked up at him. Her heart was still broken, but in the young man's eyes she saw something real, something sincere. She said nothing, but a single tear rolled down her cheek. Meanwhile, Clarisse was haunted by the forest. Undeniable proof of Mireille's innocence. It was too much for her. She completely broke down. The weight of her guilt crushed her. Alone in her room she wept uncontrollably, her head in her hands. I'm sorry, my friend, she sobbed. Forgive me. I only wanted to humiliate you, not get you killed. I never imagined the king would condemn you to death so quickly. But her tears would not bring Mireille back. The damage was done, and guilt devoured her from the inside like an unrelenting fire. One quiet night, while Mireille's mother sat outside alone in the courtyard, crying softly and speaking to the wind as if talking to her daughter, something strange happened. A cold wind passed through the yard. The air grew heavy. Slowly Mireille's spirit appeared. Her gaze was sad. Her body glowed faintly under the moonlight. She stood there silently, her heart heavy with pain, looking at her mother. I'm sorry, Mama, she whispered, even if her mother could not hear her. I never wanted to break your heart. I only wanted to make you proud. I trusted the wrong person. I believed in my friend. Tears rolled down her glowing face. I cannot rest. Not yet. Not until I've cleared my name. Not until the truth is revealed and justice is served. And most of all, I cannot rest until I see a smile return to your face. But her mother, though she felt a chill in the air, couldn't see or hear her. She simply clutched her chest and cried even harder, not knowing that Mireille was right beside her, making promises from the afterlife. That night, a strange wind swept through the village. It howled as if to announce something, a warning. Mireille's spirit had risen to demand justice. In the early hours of the next morning, before the sun rose, Mireille's ghost emerged from her grave. The wind turned icy. The sky darkened briefly. Then her spirit, filled with sorrow and unfinished purpose, disappeared into the mist. She reappeared in Clarisse's bedroom. Clarisse was sleeping deeply when a chill woke her. She opened her eyes, and there in front of her stood Mireille, pale, glowing, her eyes full of silent pain. Why? Mireille whispered in a voice like the wind. Why did you betray me? Before Clarisse could even scream, her eyes rolled back. She collapsed to the floor, seized by violent spasms. From that moment on, madness took hold of her. She ran barefoot through the village, her hair disheveled, shouting non-stop. It was me. I'm the reason Mireille died. She was innocent. I betrayed her. I planned everything. I told the boy what to do. She shouted the names of all the boys involved. Villagers gathered, stunned. Some couldn't even speak. They watched her cry, laugh, slap her face and tear out her hair. She was my best friend, she screamed. She screamed. But I hated her. I envied her beauty. I didn't like that everyone loved her. No one approached her. What punishment could be given to someone already cursed by the spirit of the victim they had killed? Then one by one, the young men who had conspired with Clarisse began to die. Some were found dead in their sleep, eyes wide open, frozen in terror. Others were discovered lifeless on the village paths, their bodies twisted in strange, frightening ways. Fear swept through the village. Meyer's spirit had not only revealed the truth, it had delivered justice with her own hands. Clarisse now wandered the village like a madwoman. She was seen at the market talking to herself, pointing at invisible shadows and shouting, "She's here! She's watching me!" The villagers now lived in fear and grief. When Meyer's mother heard Clarisse's confession, she collapsed once again in her courtyard, clutching her daughter's clothes. The pain of losing an innocent child still burned fiercely in her heart. That night, Meyer appeared once more by her side. Her spirit floated silently near her mother, who cried in the dark. "Mom, stop crying," she whispered in a soft voice. "I've restored the truth. Clarisse has gone mad. I punished the boys who lied about me. But even after all this, I still can't rest. Not until I see you smile again." But her mother, broken and weakened, could neither see nor hear her. Meyer's spirit faded once more into the night. The village, now calm and filled with sadness, began to speak her name. no longer in disgrace but with respect. Mireille, the girl who had been killed in Thort. The girl who, even in death, had the strength to fight back. One sweltering afternoon under a blazing sun, a strange stillness fell on the main road of the village. The wind blew gently, and suddenly Mireille appeared. But this time, she was no longer the broken spirit lurking in the shadows. Her eyes were full of fire. She had come for one final mission. She stood at the edge of the road and transformed before invisible eyes. A stunning young woman, radiant with an almost unreal beauty. Her features were perfect, her presence mesmerizing. Her name now was Sandra, and only one person remained to face. The king, the one who had sentenced her without proof. She waited patiently and soon a car drove by. It was the prince. As soon as he saw her, he slammed on the brakes, hypnotized by her beauty. "Hello, beautiful lady," he said, rolling down his window, completely charmed. "What's your name?" "My name is Sandra," she answered in a voice sweet as honey but heavy with secrets. "Wow, Sandra, you're stunning," he said, smiling. "Come get in. Let me give you a ride." She nodded gracefully and got into the car. Once seated, she turned toward him, looked him straight in the eyes, and without saying a word, cast a subtle charm. The prince's heart raced. He couldn't take his eyes off her. "Sandra, my love," he whispered, entranced. "Marry me. Say yes and I'll take you to my father right now. I've never felt this way before." Meyer, hidden under the name Sandra, smiled calmly and replied, "Yes, I'll marry you." Overjoyed, the prince turned the car around and sped toward the palace. He jumped out, ran inside and excitedly announced the news. "Father, Your Majesty, I've found the woman I want to marry. Her name is Sandra." The king, who had long urged his son to marry, rose to his feet, his face beaming. "My son, what wonderful news. I'm so happy for you. Bring her in so I can meet her." But as soon as Mireille, under the name Sandra, crossed the threshold of the palace, something in the air changed. A sudden, invisible tension. The king met her gaze and a strange unease came over him. He felt something was off. He opened his mouth, ready to ask, "Where are you from, young lady? Who is your father?" But before he could go any further, Mireille's charm took hold of him, just as it had with the prince. His mind clouded, his suspicions faded. He blinked slowly, then smiled, calmed. "No need to ask all that. If my son loves you, then I accept you too." He turned to the court and solemnly declared, "I, king of this village, pronounce you husband and wife." And just like that, the marriage was announced. The prince was overjoyed. The palace buzzed with excitement. The villagers were stunned by the sudden event. But no one dared question the king's decision. Yet, behind the smiles and drums, something dark loomed. Meyer had just entered the heart of the palace, the very place where her life had been unjustly taken. And now the worst was yet to come. "I, king of this village, pronounce you husband and wife." And so, a few days later, the wedding was proclaimed with a beautiful ceremony. The prince was ecstatic. The villagers remained shocked by the speed of the union. But no one dared to speak up. The next morning, as the golden sun slowly rose in the sky, Sandra sat in the palace courtyard beside the prince. Her face remained gentle, her demeanor calm, but in her eyes shone a mischievous gleam. "My dear husband," she said sweetly, "I want you to give me your bank cards. That way, I can withdraw money when I need to." The prince didn't hesitate for a second. Smiling, he pulled 2 cards from his wallet and handed them to her. "Take them, my love. Use them whenever you want, for whatever you need. Everything I have is yours." Sandra slowly took the cards with a discreet smile. "Thank you, my darling." That evening after dinner, Sandra summoned one of the palace servants. It was Grace, the very one who once. That evening after dinner, Sandra summoned one of the palace's maids. It was Grace, the same one who had once testified falsely against Mireille. When she entered the room, Grace felt a chill run down her spine. Sandra looked at her silently, her eyes deep and unreadable. "You remember me, don't you?" she said calmly. Grace's knees trembled. "No, I don't think we've met before, my lady." Sandra stood up slowly and walked toward her. "You lied. You betrayed me," she whispered. "You helped destroy an innocent life." Suddenly, the doors slammed shut by themselves. The air in the room thickened. Grace fell to her knees, begging for forgiveness. Please. I didn't know. I was forced. Sandra leaned in and whispered. You weren't forced. You chose. Now you'll understand the weight of your choices. The next morning, Grace was found wandering the palace gardens, speaking incoherently, laughing and crying at the same time. She had lost her mind. No one could explain what had happened. And one by one, all those who had taken part in Mireille's downfall began to suffer strange and terrifying fates. Mireille, now Sandra, had entered the palace not just to avenge herself, but to cleanse it of its sins. Her revenge was meticulous, quiet, and irreversible. But the story doesn't end there. That evening after dinner, Sandra summoned one of the palace maids. It was Grace, the very one who, in the past, had lied to protect the boys who accused Mireille. Grace entered the room, her head slightly bowed. You called for me, madam? Sandra turned slowly, her face calm but her eyes piercing. Yes, Grace. Come closer. Grace took a few hesitant steps forward. How may I serve you, my lady? Sandra stood up and walked toward her. Do you remember Mireille? The color drained from Grace's face. Mireille? No, I don't. Don't lie, Sandra interrupted sharply. You knew what happened. You helped destroy an innocent girl. Tears welled up in Grace's eyes. I was afraid. They threatened me. I was young, I didn't know. You knew what you were doing, Sandra said, her voice firm but low. You played a role in my death. Grace fell to her knees. Forgive me. Please. Sandra looked down at her in silence. Redemption is not in my hands. But justice is. From now on you will serve only me. You will obey without question. And you will carry the weight of your past every single day. Grace, trembling, nodded through her tears. Yes, yes, madam. And so began the quiet reign of Sandra within the palace. Her influence grew day by day, her beauty and mystery captivating everyone. But none knew the darkness behind her calm smile. She was no longer the broken spirit of Mireille. She was a force of vengeance cloaked in grace. But her mission was not yet over. The one who had once been the only person to shed a tear for Mireille. Grace, come here, Sandra called gently. The young woman immediately approached and bowed deeply. Yes, your majesty, you called for me? Yes, Sandra replied softly. Some time ago, I heard of a young girl who was stoned in this village for a crime she didn't commit. They say the king sentenced her without even investigating. Grace's face darkened at the memory of that tragedy. Yes, it's true, your majesty. She was innocent. Her name was Mireille. Many of us never understood how such a quick judgment was passed. Sandra leaned slightly toward her. And I also heard that you were the only servant who shed a tear for her. Grace was surprised. Your majesty, how do you know that? Sandra gave a faint smile. I guessed. That's all. Come with me to my room. I have something to tell you. Without hesitation, Grace followed her into the royal chambers. The air was heavy, as if charged with something unspoken. Once the door was closed, Sandra turned to her. Tell me your story. Who are you? Grace replied softly. My name is Grace. I'm an orphan. I lost my parents a long time ago. I fled here and the late queen took pity on me. She gave me a job as a servant. Since then, I've lived here in the palace. Sandra nodded slowly. I already knew all that. I just wanted to see if you would lie to me. Grace's eyes widened, shocked. How do you know? Sandra looked at her calmly. It doesn't matter, she said simply. Grace stared at her, confused, slightly worried. Sandra, seated lightly at the edge of her bed, maintained a strange calm, almost supernatural. When I heard Mireille's story, she said in a composed voice, I thought of her mother. She must be suffering immensely. So do I, Grace replied sadly. She must be so heartbroken. Sandra turned to her with a soft smile. Grace, what if I asked you to go live with her? To take her as your own mother since you have none, to offer her a bit of love, to help her smile again. Grace blinked, surprised. Sandra continued, you won't work here at the palace anymore. You'll take your belongings and go live with her. Don't worry about money. I'll take care of everything. Your only duty is to be there for her. That's all. Grace's eyes glistened. That's a beautiful idea. I accept. But what will I tell the king? He might not let me go. Sandra responded in a soft but firm voice. Don't worry about the king. I'll handle him. Grace nodded slowly. All right, Your Majesty. Tomorrow morning, I'll go to that woman. Sandra stood and gently placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You're doing something beautiful, Grace. And I promise soon it will all make sense. That night, while the palace slept under the moonlight, a silent wind swept through the halls. It carried the scent of justice, of vengeance, and of a soul still not at peace. The next morning, Sandra and Grace quietly packed a small bundle with the servants' belongings. Together, they left the palace and walked toward Mireille's mother's house. They found her sitting outside, silent, her eyes hollowed by grief, hands resting in her lap. As the two young women approached, especially Sandra, a strange shiver ran through her. Something about this woman felt familiar. Who are you? She asked in a trembling voice. Sandra stepped forward with a reassuring smile. My name is Sandra. I'm the prince's wife. And this is Grace, a palace servant. After getting married, I heard about what happened to your daughter Mireille. The woman's eyes opened wider. Her hands began to tremble at the mere mention of her daughter's name. Sandra continued gently. I've decided to send Grace to live with you, to help fill the void your daughter left behind. She's kind, and I know she'll treat you like her own mother. And don't worry about money. I'll take care of everything. Mireille's mother burst into tears, collapsing to her knees, her body shaking with sobs. Thank you, Your Majesty. May the gods bless you for this kindness. Sandra knelt down gently, helped her up and held her in her arms. Then she handed Grace a thick envelope filled with money, and another one to the mother. Grace's eyes widened when she saw the amount. Thank you so much, Your Majesty. I don't know what I did to deserve all this. Sandra replied with a calm smile. You showed compassion for Mireille. And that is enough. She promised to return regularly, then turned and walked back toward the palace. As she left, the wind picked up gently, charged with a strange energy. Grace and the mother stood there, watching her go, both feeling deep down that something far more profound had just happened than a simple act of kindness. The next morning Mireille, still living under the identity of Sandra, the prince's wife, set out for a neighboring village. That's where Noël lived, the young man who had once helped her mother during her time of grief. Arriving in his courtyard, she saw him sitting outside with his younger brother, chatting peacefully. Seeing the elegant stranger approach, Noël stood up, intrigued. Excuse me, Noël, Sandra said softly. May I speak with you for a moment? Noël exchanged a quick look with his brother, then walked aside with her. Who are you? What do you want to tell me? He asked, curious. Sandra looked at him calmly. My name is Sandra. Tell me, do you remember the woman whose daughter was unjustly stoned on the king's orders? Noël nodded solemnly. Yes, I remember. I visited her not long ago. I brought her food and medicine. That poor woman. Sandra nodded gently. The one who had once been the only person to shed a tear for Mireille. Grace, come here, Sandra called gently. The young woman immediately approached and bowed deeply. Yes, Your Majesty, you called for me? Yes, Sandra replied softly. Some time ago, I heard of a young girl who was stoned in this village for a crime she didn't commit. They say the king sentenced her without even investigating. Grace's face darkened at the memory of that tragedy. Yes, it's true, Your Majesty. She was innocent. Her name was Mireille. Many of us never understood how such a quick judgment was passed. Sandra leaned slightly toward her. And I also heard that you were the only servant who shed a tear for her. Grace was surprised. Your Majesty, how do you know that? Sandra gave a faint smile. I guessed. That's all. Come with me to my room. I have something to tell you. Without hesitation, Grace followed her into the royal chambers. The air was heavy, as if charged with something unspoken. Once the door was closed, Sandra turned to her. Tell me your story. Who are you? Grace replied softly. My name is Grace. I'm an orphan. I lost my parents a long time ago. I fled here and the late queen took pity on me. She gave me a job as a servant. Since then, I've lived here in the palace. Sandra nodded slowly. I already knew all that. I just wanted to see if you would lie to me. Grace's eyes widened, shocked. How do you know? Sandra looked at her calmly. It doesn't matter, she said simply. Grace stared at her, confused, slightly worried. Sandra, seated lightly at the edge of her bed, maintained a strange calm, almost supernatural. When I heard Mireille's story, she said in a composed voice, I thought of her mother. She must be suffering immensely. So do I, Grace replied sadly. She must be so heartbroken. Sandra turned to her with a soft smile. Grace, what if I asked you to go live with her? To take her as your own mother since you have none, to offer her a bit of love to help her smile again. Grace blinked, surprised. Sandra continued, You won't work here at the palace anymore. You'll take your belongings and go live with her. Don't worry about money. I'll take care of everything. Your only duty is to be there for her. That's all. Grace's eyes glistened. That's a beautiful idea. I accept. But what will I tell the king? He might not let me go. Sandra responded in a soft but firm voice. Don't worry about the king. I'll handle him. Grace nodded slowly. All right, Your Majesty. Tomorrow morning I'll go to that woman. Sandra stood and gently placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You're doing something beautiful, Grace. And I promise soon it will all make sense. That night, while the palace slept under the moonlight, a silent wind swept through the halls. It carried the scent of justice, of vengeance, and of a soul still not at peace. The next morning, Sandra and Grace quietly packed a small bundle with the servants' belongings. Together, they left the palace and walked toward Mireille's mother's house. They found her sitting outside, silent, her eyes hollowed by grief, hands resting in her lap. As the two young women approached, especially Sandra, a strange shiver ran through her. Something about this woman felt familiar. Who are you? She asked in a trembling voice. Sandra stepped forward with a reassuring smile. My name is Sandra. I'm the prince's wife. And this is Grace, a palace servant. After getting married, I heard about what happened to your daughter Mireille. The woman's eyes opened wider. Her hands began to tremble at the mere mention of her daughter's name. Sandra continued gently. I've decided to send Grace to live with you, to help fill the void your daughter left behind. She's kind, and I know she'll treat you like her own mother. And don't worry about money. I'll take care of everything. Mireille's mother burst into tears, collapsing to her knees, her body shaking with sobs. Thank you, Your Majesty. May the gods bless you for this kindness. Sandra knelt down gently, helped her up and held her in her arms. Then she handed Grace a thick envelope filled with money, and another one to the mother. Grace's eyes widened when she saw the amount. Thank you so much, Your Majesty. I don't know what I did to deserve all this. Sandra replied with a calm smile. You showed compassion for Mireille. And that is enough. She promised to return regularly, then turned and walked back toward the palace. As she left, the wind picked up gently, charged with a strange energy. Grace and the mother stood there, watching her go, both feeling deep down that something far more profound had just happened than a simple act of kindness. The next morning Mireille, still living under the identity of Sandra, the prince's wife, set out for a neighboring village. That's where Noël lived, the young man who had once helped her mother during her time of grief. Arriving in his courtyard, she saw him sitting outside with his younger brother, chatting peacefully. Seeing the elegant stranger approach, Noël stood up, intrigued. Excuse me, Noël, Sandra said softly. May I speak with you for a moment? Noël exchanged a quick look with his brother, then walked aside with her. Who are you? What do you want to tell me? He asked, curious. Sandra looked at him calmly. My name is Sandra. Tell me, do you remember the woman whose daughter was unjustly stoned on the king's orders? Noël nodded solemnly. Yes, I remember. I visited her not long ago. I brought her food and medicine. That poor woman. Sandra nodded gently. The next morning Mireille, still living under the identity of Sandra, wife of the prince, set out for the neighboring village. That's where Noël lived, the young man who had once helped her grieving mother. Upon arriving in his courtyard, she saw him sitting outside with his little brother, chatting peacefully. When he saw her approaching, Noël stood up, intrigued by the presence of such an elegantly dressed stranger. Excuse me, Noël, Sandra said gently. May I speak with you for a moment? Noël exchanged a quick glance with his brother, then walked away with her. Who are you? What do you want to tell me? He asked curiously. Sandra looked at him calmly. My name is Sandra. Tell me, do you remember that woman whose daughter was unjustly stoned to death on the king's orders? Noel nodded solemnly. Yes, I remember. I went to see her not long ago. I brought her food and medicine. That poor woman. Sandra nodded softly. You did something very noble. Thank you for showing her compassion when most people turned their backs. Noel lowered his eyes. It was the least I could do. No one deserved what happened to that girl. It was a tragedy, and a shame. Sandra looked into his eyes. And what if I told you that justice is not always what it seems? That sometimes the truth hides in plain sight, waiting for the right time to be revealed. Noel frowned slightly, trying to make sense of her words. Why are you telling me all this? He asked slowly. Sandra smiled faintly. Because I believe you were one of the few who truly cared. And when the time comes, maybe you'll understand everything. She turned to leave, but then paused and looked back at him. Take care of your heart, Noel. The truth has a way of coming back. Sometimes with the wind, sometimes with fire. Then she walked away, her steps light yet firm, leaving Noel standing there, puzzled, yet strangely moved by the encounter. As she disappeared into the distance, a gentle wind swept through the village, the same wind that had stirred the palace the night before. It carried with it the scent of memory, of justice, and of a promise not yet fulfilled. And somewhere in the silent whispers of the air, Mireille's name was no longer one of shame, but one of truth and quiet victory. I come from this village, and today I am the wife of the prince. Noel's expression immediately changed. His brows furrowed. His voice turned tense. Wait a second. You mean you're the king's daughter-in-law? The same king who sentenced Meyer to death. Sandra calmly raised her hands. Please, Noel, calm down. I'm not the king. I'm just his son's wife. And when I married the prince and heard about this tragedy, my heart broke. I knew I had to do something. Noel stayed silent, still wary but willing to listen. I've already started helping her mother, Sandra continued. Grace, a servant from the palace, now lives with her. She treats her like her own mother. But that's not all. That's why I came to talk to you. She looked him straight in the eyes. I want you to go and meet Grace. Talk to her. Get to know her. If you fall in love, marry her. And if you marry her, I will support your union. I will build you a house. I'll give you a car and everything you need to live. Stay with this woman. Love her like a mother. Help her smile again. In return, I will make sure you lack nothing. Noel was speechless for a few seconds. Then, deeply moved, he finally said, That's incredibly generous of you. Honestly, I've always wanted to welcome this woman into my home, but she always refused. Still, I help her as much as I can. He paused, then gave a small smile. I'll do as you say. Tomorrow morning, I'll go to the village to meet Grace. Sandra smiled warmly at him before turning to leave. May your heart always remain kind, Noel. Once she left, Noel returned to his younger brother and told him everything. The boy jumped with joy. Brother, God remembered us today. I'll wake you up early tomorrow so you can go see Grace. Noel laughed heartily. Beyond this offer, I've always felt something for this woman's pain. I really wanted to help her. But I still hope Grace is beautiful. I've always dreamed of marrying a beautiful woman. His little brother smiled. Then maybe your dream is about to come true. The next morning, Noel got up early. After getting ready, he headed straight to the house of Mireille's mother. As he walked through the village, a strange calm filled the air, as if something good was about to happen. When he arrived, he saw Grace sweeping the yard. She wore a simple, clean dress, and her face radiated a gentle beauty and kindness. Noel stopped for a second, captivated. Good morning, he greeted with a smile. Grace looked up, slightly startled, but she returned the smile. Good morning, sir. How can I help you? My name is Noel, he said warmly. I came to visit your mother. Grace blushed slightly. She's inside. Please come in. Noel stepped into the house and greeted the elderly woman, who welcomed him with a smile. They spoke briefly, and then Noel turned back to Grace. You've only been here a short time, but this house already feels lighter, he said. There's something peaceful about your presence. Grace lowered her eyes modestly. I just try to help however I can. Noel chuckled. I'm not very good at hiding my intentions. I came here to meet you. I heard you live here now and I thought maybe we could talk more. Perhaps get to know each other. Grace looked up surprised. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now, Noel replied gently. But if you're willing, I'd like to come visit again tomorrow. Grace nodded shyly. Okay, you can come. As Noel walked back home, he felt lighter, more hopeful. That night he couldn't sleep. The thought of Grace filled his mind. There was something special about her. Something pure and calm that soothed his soul. In the days that followed, Noel came to visit every afternoon. Each time he brought small gifts, fruits, herbs, or simple treats. But more than anything, he brought joy. Grace began to laugh more, speak more, and little by little, her sadness faded. The mother of Mireille watched them with a knowing smile. Something was blooming between these two souls. One afternoon, as the sun set in golden hues, Sandra came to visit again. She brought news from the palace and spent a long moment talking with Mireille's mother. When Noel arrived, he was surprised to find Sandra already there. Good evening, Your Majesty, he said, respectfully bowing. Sandra smiled. Good evening, Noel. I heard you've been coming here quite often. Noel scratched his head, embarrassed. Yes, I appreciate the peace of this home. Sandra laughed softly. Sometimes peace is found where hearts are true. She turned to Grace. How are you settling in? Grace smiled. Very well. She treats me like her own daughter. Sandra's gaze lingered on her with a tender intensity. That's because, in a way, you are meant to be here. Later, as the stars filled the sky, Sandra sat alone with Mireille's mother. She took her hands gently and said, I must confess something. My name isn't really Sandra. I am Mireille. The woman froze, eyes wide with disbelief. What did you say? I survived. They thought I was dead. But I was saved, and I came back. I had to hide to protect myself. I became Sandra, wife of the prince. But inside I've always remained Mireille, your daughter. Tears flowed down the old woman's cheeks. She placed her hand over her mouth, overwhelmed. My daughter. Mireille, you're alive. Yes, Mama. I'm alive. And I came back not for revenge, but to bring healing. They cried in each other's arms for a long time. The silence of the night witnessed their reunion, sacred and eternal. The next morning Mireille, still under the identity of Sandra, returned to the palace. Her heart was light, yet determined. She knew that to truly close this chapter, she had one last thing to do. She entered the royal court quietly. The prince was seated with his advisors. Upon seeing her, he smiled. My wife, he said warmly. You left early this morning. She nodded. Yes, I needed to see someone important. But now I have something to say. The room fell silent. I am not who you think I am, she began. My name is not Sandra. I am Mireille, the young woman who was sentenced to death in this village, falsely accused, condemned without a trial. Gasps echoed around the room. The prince stood stunned. Mireille? But how? I was saved. Someone found me, healed me, hid me. I returned in secret, not to destroy but to understand. And in my time here I discovered love, compassion, and the truth. The old king, seated nearby, lowered his head in shame. I failed you, he whispered. I judged too quickly. I allowed others to dictate justice without seeking the truth. I carry that guilt every day. Mireille stepped closer. You cannot undo the past, but you can acknowledge it. The king stood slowly and in front of all, knelt before her. Forgive me. There was silence. Then Mireille nodded. I forgive you. For me. For my mother. For all the innocent voices silenced by power. Tears ran down the prince's face as he took her hand. You are Mireille, but also Sandra, the woman I've come to love. Stay with me, not as a lie but as your true self. She smiled. Only if truth and justice guide our path forward. And so the kingdom changed. Laws were rewritten. Investigations became mandatory before any judgment. Mireille continued her life by the prince's side. Not as a woman hiding in fear, but as one reborn in truth. Grace remained with her new mother. Noel never stopped visiting, and over time, he and Grace built their own story. A quiet tale born from ashes and healing. And Mireille, once condemned and broken, became a symbol of resilience. a queen of hearts, not by title but by soul.